Hey, I'm Tom Miller, and this session on the most dangerous form of leadership, assumptive leadership, is going to teach you how assumptions destroy trust, relationships, and culture, and how you as a leader can eliminate them. Let me just say, if you haven't watched the first session on doubt, the silent enemy of leadership, you may want to go back and take a listen, a look at part one of this three-part series that we put together for school principals, school leaders, or anybody in leadership. This was an important part too of the lesson because as I was thinking as a principal, like where have most of the struggles been for me as a leader? And they've been this one word, assumption, right? And so there's a story that most of us would probably never have lived to, right? But honestly, every leader has been here in the past. It's that you notice something, you feel something, you interpret something, uh, and you fill in that meaning, whatever it may be, right? Before you speak to the person, you've got this incredibly big story in your head. And the process is so fast. It's almost automatic, right? Probably because I've been doing it for 49 years at the time of this video, right? We rarely notice, and mainly because it's human, right? It's human. And so, but here's the truth. Assumptions, right, are the most dangerous form of leadership because they destroy trust silently and almost instantly without correction. So this isn't like conflict. It's not like gossip or resistance can really impact culture. Assumptions happen inside of us, and nobody sees them, right? No one knows that they're happening. And the person who's the person that you're frustrated with has zero idea that we've built this story about them. In fact, they probably have their own assumptions about you in a different way. Assumptions are invisible until we explode, whatever that may be, right? Through our body language, through our words, through our actions. So what an assumption actually is it's the story that we tell ourselves in the absence of information, right? So when we don't know something, we make something up. And in the absence of information, we typically assume the worst, right? And that's really because of this human negativity bias that we have. We don't make up any positive stories. We typically fill in the worst case scenario thinking. And there's all these ways you can look at it, right? We judge ourselves on our intentions, but we judge others on their results, right? Or we also have this lens principle where we see other people not through their lens or their perspective. We see them through our lens and our perspective. That's why assumptions are a culture killer, right? Uh, so why is assumptive leadership so destructive? Well, they erode trust without a word being spoken. They build resentment without a conversation. They damage relationships without intent. They block communication. They distort reality because you're creating this new story. They create a lot of tension where none exists, right? You may avoid that employee right in the walkway, or you may employ just avoid that person. Um, uh, you know, uh, um, you break alignments, you waste emotional energy thinking about it and worrying about it. And it also causes leaders to completely misjudge people. And the person you're assuming about, they don't even know that it's happening. They don't have any idea that this is actually going on. That's why assumptive leadership is so dangerous. It's based, it's leadership based on fiction, right? Not fact and not the truth, which we talked about during our lesson on doubt. So there's five types of assumptions that leaders need to be watching out for that I want to share. One, um, and these are the kind of assumptions that just destroy culture the fastest. Okay. One is intent assumptions, and this is the most dangerous intent assumption. So, you assume, right, why someone did something, right? So she ignored the email on purpose because, she doesn't think she needs to answer them, or she don't want to do it, or she don't want to listen to me, right? He doesn't care about the kids, right? Because he maybe didn't tie their shoes like you would, or whatever, right? Or they resisted me. Intent assumptions turn normal behavior into personal betrayal. I want to say it again because I want you to catch this and write it down if you're taking notes. Intent assumptions turn normal behavior into personal betrayal. It's a story of betrayal. All right. The second is competency assumptions. You assume people don't know what to do or how to do it or why it matters without ever checking clarity or training. This is where the frustration of why aren't they doing this comes from, right? Why isn't this done now? Why isn't this done now? And give me a hand up if you've ever had a company assumption. There's not a day that goes by that that thought doesn't come through my head, right? So we've got intent assumptions, most dangerous, and the second one is competency assumptions. Okay, number three, let's talk about alignment assumptions. Alignment assumptions. So you assume people share the same priorities, the same sense of urgency, the same sense of values, the same vision that you do. People see the school through their lens, whatever it may be. Classroom teacher sees it through the classroom lens. Maybe the custodian sees it through like the cleaning lens, right? The parent sees it through the carpool lens and the communication home lens, right? Or their child's success. Board members see it, right? Sometimes what the principal tells them because they don't actually go into school, or the board members who are hearing it from the community who don't take the time to verify. They just trust the information being brought to them because maybe that's the only communication they get. Right? Leaders see it through, the whole system, right? They're more about an organization or like a strategy. So when I say leaders, like higher level positional leaders, superintendents, executive directors, heads of schools, okay? Nobody is aligned unless you align them. Let's say that again. Nobody is aligned unless you align them, right? So number four, well, we've talked about three, intent assumptions, company assumptions, and alignment assumptions, okay? So far, I've got like 9 hands up, right? I have suffered from all these assumptions probably in the last 48 hours to maybe 48 minutes. Number four, emotional assumptions. You assume you know how somebody feels. You assume you know how somebody feels. So the example might be she's mad at me, she checked out, they don't like change, right? When the reality might be on their side, stress, overwhelm, uncertainty, personal challenges, burnout. Assuming emotions destroys any chance of empathy, right? Assuming emotions destroy any chance of empathy. And number five, information assumptions, right? So you assume that, people saw the email or read it. You assume someone understood the directive, someone heard the announcement, someone remembers the expectation. And the spoiler alert is 98% of the time, if not higher, they didn't. This is the silent destroyer of follow through. Okay. This is a silent destroyer of follow through. So I'll run through those five again. We got intent assumptions. Okay. Intent assumptions. We've got competency assumptions. We've got alignment assumptions, emotional assumptions, and then information assumptions. Okay. There's just five, right, of these assumptions that you've got to be looking out for. And when I say you got to be looking out for, like you got to be looking out for in you, and in your team, right? You have to help them understand their biases by better understanding your leadership biases, right? So here's some warning signs that you're leading by assumption. These can help you just raise your awareness, right? To make sure you're not slipping into story making rather than leading and seeking to understand. Number one is you feel resentment, but haven't actually had a conversation, an actual talking conversation, not a text, not an email. Okay. You feel resentment, but haven't had a conversation. And if you're part, right, of our empowerment mentoring program, you know, like the three R's, nothing grows in resistance, right? Revenge, or resentment. Nothing grows. Number two, you're replaying situations in your head, not in conversation. Okay, you're replaying situations in your head, not in conversation. Again, dialogue is going to be the key. Number three, you think they should just know. Well, they should just know because they have a degree, right? I've got my doctoral, degrees. Like that's an assumption that I know how to do lots of things. No, all it shows is that I was resilient enough and had the means to just continue to go to school. That's really it. Doesn't mean a lot, right? So, number one, you feel resentment, but you haven't had a conversation. Number two, you're replaying situations in your head, not in conversation. Number three, you think they should just know. And number four, you avoid asking clarifying questions. Okay. You avoid asking clarifying questions. That's a big one too. All right, a couple more. Your stories about people grow more emotional over time, right? So the longer that you don't have the conversation, the longer that you don't clarify, right? It gets bigger and bigger, doesn't it? And it gets harder and harder to probably have the conversation. That's why one of my favorite lessons to teach is our difficult conversations, right? And I was talking about you got to shovel the pile when it's small. So as soon as you see it, right, you got to address it. Say, you know, I don't know if you meant it, about this, but I just want to make sure I heard you right, right? Or help me understand how come you're using this? Okay. You're just immediately clarifying, right? As soon as you hear it and address it, right? So that's the fifth one. Number six, you build a narrative but have no facts. You build a narrative but have no facts. And so I'm a fact seeker. A lot of people think that I'm questioning them. I'm just trying to get curious to get to a better understanding of what's the current reality here, right? What is the possible misconception, right? Or misperception. Okay. And number seven is you've personalized a behavior that wasn't personal. You personalized a behavior that wasn't personal. And again, if you're part of some of our leadership programs, you probably heard me say you got to separate the behavior from the being. Separate the behavior from the being. All right. So those are seven warning signs that you're leaning by assumption. Which of those seven might you be, suffering from right now? All seven? One, two, right? Which ones of those sevens might, and then you could, that's a good action step to just start paying closer attention to where I might be leading by assumption. And then you could start to really think about your assumption gap, right? So the assumption gap is the gap between expectation, sorry. The assumption gap is space created when expectations aren't clear, communication is missing, feedback has not happened, doubt is unaddressed. Okay. Expectations aren't clear, communication is missing, feedback hasn't happened, and doubt is unaddressed. And so the moment clarity disappears, assumptions take over. And it's like immediate. It's immediate. So doubt creates the gap, assumptions fill the gap, and cultures pay the price. Your culture pays the price. And this is where lesson one on doubt and lesson two on assumptions really connect, right? You can really work both sides here. And so like a great example, I just remember when I was in my first years as a middle school director, the expectation was that you were at your door 7:30 in the morning, greeting every student, shaking their hands, welcoming them in the classroom. And there was lots of times I would stand at the top of the campus, right? And I'd be watching for, transitions and I'd be looking to see who's at their door, right? And it'd be maybe two or three of the ten teachers that you could easily see in our outdoor campus. So it was my immediate assumption, right, went to they're late or they're ignoring expectations or they don't care, right? Whatever it may be. But truth required, right? That facts could have been, maybe they're sick, maybe they're out, right? Maybe we don't have a sub, maybe they're helping a student, maybe they're talking to a parent, maybe they had a personal, emergency, maybe they had a misunderstanding. So I just immediately went to the negative. I didn't even like consider addressing the three or four that were at their door. Say, hey, thank you so much, Mrs. Waters for being at your door. Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. Right? Like. I'm a big believer in rewarding the behavior you desire to see, but mentally I go immediately into assumption. I have to remind myself about rewarding the positive. Okay. So without checking reality, you fill a gap with emotion, negative emotion, right? Resentment grows, culture erodes. Okay. And if you don't have that conversation to get a better understanding, you're going to continually judge that person on whether or not they're standing at the door at 7:30. Right. So I'm sure you've got lots of lessons like that in your head, right? And you can really think through where am I assuming that people know what to do, which way to walk. We've got it going on in our school right now. We've got our students that are walking out this back end of campus because it's the fastest way to get to the school after they've got practice. Well, they're literally walking through a retention pond, right? They're walking through like gardens, and I'm like, no. And I just assume that someone has told them besides me, right? Or someone has set an expectation or a rule, and it doesn't matter how many barriers I try to put up, right? In their mind, I can go this way. So I'm assuming they're right. Like, what's the matter with these kids? Right? So they're either being um, you know, you know, completely just disobedient, right? Or I don't know, incompetent to understand this is not a walkway. Those are my assumptions, right? Without sitting down, like, hey, have we had a good conversation with all of our students about proper, like, here are the walkways, here's the safety walkways, all those pieces. So I just assume that they know better, and they don't because they're kids. It's okay. Right. So how do you close the assumption gap? You're like, Tom, you've yapped enough. Let's go. How do you close the assumption gap? There's a four-step framework here. One is you set and communicate clear, agreed upon expectations. This is critically important that one, have a clear vision of what you want done, what you want it to look like, and you've got it communicated and agreed upon. Okay. Agreed upon means that there's a clear understanding that you heard me and you understand, or you've given some sort of follow-up, right? That it's agreed upon expectations. So if it's not agreed upon, and if it's not written down, if it's not revisited, and if it's not communicated, it's not an expectation, it's a hope. And hope is not a strategy, everybody, right? And clarity kills assumptions. Clarity will kill assumption every time. And we've got this great expectations worksheet that I just love to use, and it really helps me really think through like how I want to communicate work to be done. So if you like that, there's a link here. I'm in the description. You can grab a copy and download it yourself. But you want to be very, very careful, right? With this one, right? Making sure like before you get on somebody, like I always have to ask myself, have I clearly communicated that? Like, have I really like am I sure I took the time to explain to them how I would want that? Okay. So number two is turn assumptions into observations. So there's a script that we use for our, difficult conversations, but this works for everything. It's VRUOL, vision, reality, understand, right? Opportunity, leadership. So, V is vision, right? This is what I expected to see, or this is what, I had, communicated, or this is what we committed to, whatever the vision was. R is reality, right? So this is where you bring, and this is exactly what I saw or heard, right? And you got to be specific. You can't use like very broad generalizations, like all the time, like you're always late, or right. And then the U is understand. You're just asking them a question, help me understand, right? So it might be that, hey, Tom, we agreed that all of our teachers would be standing at the door at 7:30 to greet the students. But when I happened to walk past your room, you weren't at the door. Can you help me understand how come you weren't there? And then you just listen. This is where you got to shut up. Two ears and only one mouth, right? Two ears, and you listen, and you hear what they have to say. Oh, okay. Thank you for, helping me know that you were on a call with a parent. I really appreciate that, right? Or, whatever those pieces may be, right? So the O, comes into, well, what are some other opportunities, right, that we can do to make sure you're there at 7:30? Because, it's important when you set expectations, you talk about the why, right? So it could be safety, it could be we want every kid's day to start, right? Seeing their, leader at the door, whatever it is, right? But it's really important that you can use this very easy non-emotional script vision, reality, understand. You could just stop right there. You, and if you really want to work close the gap, right? What are some options, opportunities? And L is leadership. How could I have communicated this better? How could I lead you better so we don't have this, situation next time? All depending kind of where you are, but the VRU is very important. This is what I expected to see. R is reality. This is what I did see, and U is help me understand. Okay. But, it's a non-emotional, very factual, humble, team-oriented way to close the assumption gap, right? So number three is declare noble intent. And so you really got to take the time, right, to just know that everybody in your world is doing the best that they can, right? Everybody's doing their best. Even at their worst, they're still at their best at that moment, right? So see everybody as a 10 unless their actions, right, specifically lower their score. So don't assume because of someone's background or someone's experience or where they come from or how they're dressed, whatever, that they're not trying their best. You don't know what it's like. We don't know what it's like to be in their shoes in any capacity. I only know what it's like to be in my shoes, and it's hard work. I'm the hardest person to lead in my life, no doubt, right? So this prevents snap judgments, internal narratives, any spiral of like resentment, okay? And this one idea can transform an entire school culture if we see everybody tried their best. Everybody tried their best. And I think this is too where there's this theory called the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge, basically is that, I've had incredible leadership experiences and great opportunities through my, consultancy work and my leadership work and my work with the Office of Charter Schools, with my travel, right? So sometimes I forget that people on my team or, folks that I'm working with, they haven't had that experience. So they don't see what I see, right? They don't have that, background or that perspective. And I have to be really careful that I don't assume that they know what to do or they see the bigger picture. I was like, oh, it's my job to help close that gap for them. See, we all think that, right, that 20 years ago we were at the same level we were now, and you weren't. In fact, you were terrible. I was terrible, right? I'm still working on it now, right? We were all terrible 20 years ago. We were all terrible maybe 3 years ago. But we assume, right, that no one taught us how to do these things. And somebody did, whether it was through a book or a mentor or failing forward, you learned through evaluative experience. So be careful that you're not suffering from the curse of knowledge and take the time to declare noble intent with those that you serve. All right. So number one, I'll just review these again. Number one, go back to my notes. Number one was set, communicate clear, agreed upon expectations. Number two is turn assumptions into observations. Number three is declare noble intent. And number four is ask clarifying questions, right? This is really important. Assumptions die in the presence of truth. And, three easy ones. What happened? What were you expecting? What do you need next time? What do you need from me next time? Right? The one that I, every single day or every single moment, I asked, what role did you have in this problem, Tom? What role did you have in this problem? And what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, Tom Miller? What are you going to do about it? So questions collapse the story, truth collapses the resentment, and clarity collapses the assumption. Okay. So it's important to ask clarifying questions all the time. Just get super curious and say, yeah, yeah, I'm just trying to understand. Oh my gosh, I'm so curious. Tell me more about this. Tell me more. What a great, tell me more. Right. Or hey, we had agreed on not, using, you know, Chromebooks for like assessments. But I happen to see, right, that help me understand, right? Or maybe they're using an older text or just something that they love. Because I have found that people would rather uh, get in trouble than look incompetent. Does that make sense? People would rather, which is amazing, they would rather get in trouble than look incompetent. And we carry this, right? This level of fear and doubt that we're not enough and we're not doing enough and we're not good enough, right? So rather than like shift and transform and change, I'll be like, "Ugh, I'm going to stay comfortable and use the tools that I want to." So that's where you got to get really curious, right? You can't judge, you can't get upset. You got to be curious to how come they're still doing it an old way, an old way. So here's a reflection exercise for you. Uh, if you journal, and journaling is great, and you can journal, highly recommend you writing it out, not necessarily typing out, because there's something about, from the tip of your tongue to to the tip of your pen. Writing out is a really great exercise. And then you could write it if you want, and you could take a picture of it, run it through your chat GPT, or, I mean, however you want to do it to help with your responses to create your action plan. But what story am I currently telling myself about someone? That's question number one. What story am I currently telling myself about someone, either someone I lead or someone in my family? Number two, what evidence do I actually have? Right. So what's the story I'm telling? And what's the evidence, right, that I actually have? What conversation am I avoiding? And with who or whom? What question would bring truth into the situation? And how would the relationship improve if I clarified instead of assumed? And I was thinking about this. If you look at your, relationship compass, it's another lesson that we do. If someone's a 6 out of 10 and you want it to be a higher, right? What's one thing that I could do to make it a 7? Right. So that's all about that number 5. How would the relationship improve if I clarified instead of assumed, right? How would it be better for the culture? How would it be better for the team? So, and this is where transformation happens through reflection, right? And then evaluative experience and then action steps, right? So take those 5 questions. I would love to see your responses if you're willing to, reply, to this email that you got it from, or you could send me a message. You could text me. If you got my phone number. So love it. So this is the close of lesson number 2. We got one more lesson, and just kind of what I want you to be thinking about, right? Make sure you've watched lesson 1 and you've gone through the reflection, and go through lesson 2 and do that reflection. And then number 3 will be ready to really talk about how do we really take this information to close gaps and improve our culture, right? Because remember, doubt creates emotional distance. Doubt creates emotional distance. Assumptions create relational distance. And together they erode culture from the inside out. Okay. Remember, culture is the average sum of the behavior of all the people in your organization or on your team. So doubt creates emotional distance, assumptions create relational distance, and together they erode culture from the inside out. So lesson 3 is going to show you how to rebuild trust, right? Alignment and clarity, and eliminate that erosion cycle entirely. And I love it. So if this lesson was added value to you, please, like, share, make sure you're subscribing, leave a comment. If it was good or bad, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. And I would love, if you're willing, right, send me your answers on your reflection questions. I would love to kind of hear what resonated with you and what's your action step. All right. Thanks so much. And keep making a difference.